Folks, the Winnipeg Jets are going to be drafting for the future here in a few weeks, and as the Jets eye a couple of top prospects, who might they be looking at 18th or 19th overall? There are some choices, some of them pretty decent, some of them rather interesting. We're going to focus on two prospects and also look ahead towards next season on how the Jets can try and approach what will be a very challenging year, is my guess, on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Everydayers can be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of their favorite podcasting platforms, including Apple, Spotify, Google, Megaphone, Odyssey, and YouTube. Doing so is completely free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. But most of all, we just really love and appreciate your support, and thank you for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day, every day. Tonight's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Stay tuned to hear more about Gametime and how they can help you find the best last-minute deals and killer prices in event tickets. Now, like I said at the start of the episode, I wanted to take some time to talk about a couple of prospects for the Jets as they are preparing for, a bit of a reboot, right? We're looking at a team that, in all likelihood, is going to have some major departures this offseason. And with all of that being said, the Jets are going to have to find value in the intermediate rounds because the team still wants to be playoff competitive, but that usually means that if you're looking at draft prospects and stuff, you're not likely to be very high up in the draft order. So the Jets this year are at like 18th or 19th overall. I'm pretty sure it's 19th. For some reason, I also keep seeing 18th. I'm not really sure where that's coming from. But basically, almost towards the back third of the first round, maybe back half would be the more apt description. Far enough back to where you're starting to look at players who might be not necessarily fringe NHLers, but are maybe slightly longer shots, and are certainly not as clear-cut for top 6 or top 4 duty, depending on what position you're looking at. So the first player of interest is Quentin Musty. Quentin's been playing for the Sudbury Wolves, and, he's a very interesting player because he kind of, to me, seems like this very big, not super fast necessarily, but powerful offensive creator who doesn't necessarily have like crazy stick handling, right? You're not looking at this player and you're thinking, wow, Musty is just deking and diving around every single opponent. I think he can do that, and I think he'll use it to create separation. But Musty's game is kind of about positioning, finding those shooting lanes, being patient, and then opting for a clever pass or a sharp shot. And Mustys Release is interesting. It's not like it sort of explodes, but it's a very heavy shot, right? He can drive it really low, and oftentimes it causes pretty big rebounds. Goalies certainly are tested pretty regularly by what looks like a very powerful, strong release that definitely seems to leave a bit of a welt. And I like his passing. I feel like at times, from the footage that I've been able to dig up, Musty has, sharp offensive instincts. He might overcook a pass or miss it, or maybe not always recognize the best outlet option, but it feels like that's stuff that you can work on. I think the one thing that I do kind of wonder with Musty is in terms of his like NHL caliber speed, right? How fast can his top gear get? It does seem like he takes a little bit to spool up and kind of get down the ice, which is not a problem. The Jets certainly have their share of bigger, heavier skaters. They're working with Rutger McGroarty right now to try and get him up to NHL speed here in the next couple of years. So that I don't see as much of a big problem necessarily. Musty, for me, I feel like has enough tools and the IQ to kind of make use of some really good skill sets that I think realistically, he's got a nice shot at being a solid middle six player. I've seen people talk about him maybe being more of a top six winger. I think for now, middle six is probably the safer bet just because, you know, a third line role, I think, for a scoring winger who can do the sorts of things that he does, whether it's physical back checking, creating space against defenders in one on one matchups, all of that stuff, I think is very valuable, whether you're playing in a top six role or not. And so for me, Musty, certainly it would be nice if he one day became like a second liner, but I think when I compare him to like Oliver Moore, for instance, Moore for me was a little more consistent. I think Oliver's approach seems like he will, in all likelihood, really rack up some crazy points if he gets the right line mates. Musty has that potential, but I think there's a little more work to do with some of his mechanics. But in terms of like production, you look at his points totals from Sudbury, and he's doing pretty darn well for himself. So I'd certainly be interested. I've seen him taken a couple of spots ahead of where the Jets are picking, so I'm not sure that he'll actually be available there. But with how the drafts have been over the past few years, I feel like everything after the first 10 picks is really up for debate. So who knows? Musty might fall to the Jets. I think if he does, if he were to be available there, he'd certainly be a player I'd be pretty happy with the Jets snagging. Now, there is one other player who I think I might have even higher in some ways, although this guy has some circumstantial stuff that maybe would make him less popular. We'll see how this pans out. But this player is a very dynamic blue liner with the potential to be very explosive at the NHL level. We'll talk about who this player is in just a little bit. Before we go any further, though, I want to shout out our friends and partners at Gametime. Buying tickets to your favorite events really shouldn't be stressful. A lot of you are probably used to buying hockey tickets or maybe concert tickets or just other general sporting tickets, and you know how expensive that crap gets. I mean, a lot of you might be getting price gouged, or even if you're not, right, you might not even know what the view is like, and that's where Gametime is here to help. Not only do they give you images of seat views and stuff, but they also help link you to great flash deals and last-minute ticket sales, which those of you who have ever bought last-minute tickets know that oftentimes people are just trying to get rid of them, and Gametime makes it super easy. You don't have to worry about planning months in advance, spending hundreds of dollars, and, kind of dealing with all of the fees and stuff that get tacked on. You get a great lowest price guarantee and event cancellation protection, amongst so many other things. And if you find a ticket in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So there's really no reason not to give Gametime a try. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us again as we are talking about some draft prospects for the Jets and players who could potentially be available around 19th overall. Like I said at the start, 19th overall is not a great position in terms of lots of elite talent, but I do think you'll find some legitimate project players who could become quality NHLers. And we talked about Oliver Moore being one a few episodes ago. We just talked about Quentin Musty potentially being another option, real venomous winger with a great shot. And an interesting kind of powerful stride that might make him a real threat in certain scenarios. The last player we're going to talk about for this episode is, this one's an interesting one. He's a left-handed defender from Russia, Mikhail Gulyayev. And Gulyayev is a very interesting player. I've seen a lot of different comparisons, everything from Quentin Hughes to like Cale Makar. And what's interesting about his scouting reports is that I've seen them all over the place. Some people really describe him as a very active, dynamic defender with almost effortless edge work. Others say that he is offensively timid and occasionally opts for too many safe outlet passes rather than using his dynamic skating to his advantage. So the reports all over the place. And certainly in terms of where he's been playing in Russia, he's been all up and down Avangard Omsk's system from like the MHL all the way up to the KHL. Now, there have been some like pretty consistent things that I've seen in the reports. The first thing is that he actually defensively sounds a lot like Enstrom, right? Uses a longer stick to good advantage, knows how to, or whether it's a longer stick or not, just knows how to really use it to cut off passing and shooting lanes. He's the kind of defender who relies more on pre-positioning and clogging up space rather than going for big physical hits or shot blocks. Not that he won't throw checks, and he's not necessarily small. He's like 5'10", and comes in weighing a pretty good clip, and he's not afraid to be pushed around or anything like that. But I think where he differs from some of the other players, um, you know, it's interesting with him. He seems to be the kind of guy that people describe as more cerebral when it comes to defending. I would say in some areas he's a little bit like Morrissey, maybe not somebody that I would necessarily rely on making the most elite top end defensive reads, but he can shut down some good rushes. He can use really smart positioning and good stick work to try and disrupt plays and really put pressure on puck carriers. I have seen some stuff where people have said he's kind of glided around at times, which is not uncommon with young prospects. Where I think there's a lot of reason for interest is in that edge work, though. This is the thing that can really elevate his game from being merely interesting to something next level. And it's why I think so many teams would be potentially taking a swing on a player who's got another couple of years with a KHL, right? He's got like a 2-year contract still, so it'd be a while before he comes overseas. But Gulyayev is very fast. I mean, this dude's skating is extremely explosive, and he loves to cut through the neutral zone with relative ease. When people describe him as like a Quinn Hughes light, I don't think that is an incorrect assessment stylistically speaking. The dude just loves to jet around, and he can get up and down the ice very quickly. He can do so with possession with relative ease. He can lead transition and out or breakouts pretty easily. Whether he does that on a consistent basis, I don't watch enough of the KHL to know. In fact, I really don't watch the KHL at all. So this is coming from like highlight footage and stuff, which doesn't always reveal the full picture. But from the highlights, it's very clear to see why you could expect him to maybe be more aggressive with a change in coaching, right? I've heard some describe the current coaching in Russia as often being kind of conservative when it comes to defensive activations and stuff. And with Gulyayev, he's actually very good once he drops below the face-off circles. He can pinch into the corners. He can make some really solid passes. Where I kind of wonder is if he's being coached to be super conservative, does that change his psychological approach if he were to, or philosophical approach if he were to come to North America, right? Would he be able to adapt and use some very interesting skill sets and tool sets to become a more NHL caliber defender? I feel like offensively, there's a lot of jump there. I would like him to maybe not use point shots as much. It's not like he's afraid to get into the slot area. He will attack those spaces. It's just how often is he doing that, and how is he creating points? I've seen a lot of it apparently coming from redirections, which is certainly not a bad thing. But for a player who has skating and edge work that is as explosive and dynamic as Gulyayev is, it would be nice if he can actually make use of that and kind of do the Morrissey thing. I keep mentioning Morrissey. I feel like a hybrid of Morrissey and Enstrom is what Gulyayev could probably be at his very best. And I don't know that he'll necessarily hit those levels of production and defensive impact, because Enstrom was one of the best pure defenders in terms of like spatial awareness and disrupting and cutting down those passing and shooting lanes. Everyone will always say, oh, he was small and got bullied. And with Enstrom, yeah, he was small and sometimes he got hit into corners and stuff. But the main thing was that he kept the puck away from the net. And that's kind of Gulyayev's approach too. Force them to make low danger shots, force them to the outside, keep them away from the slot area. And look, you might not defensively dominate your opponent, but the point is to make them very uncomfortable. And that's what Gulyayev has generally been doing in rushes. So something they keep track of, but I think, of course, people look at that and they're like, what is his offensive upside? Because that's where you could really derive some extreme value if he starts to activate more. I feel like he does have the ability to sort of drive through the center of the ice and really create space on those breakouts. Be curious to see how he does that, especially on the power play. But for a prospect that you could potentially get towards that back half of the first round, I really wouldn't mind taking a swing at it. It's a home run swing. It won't come good for a couple of years, But, with the Jets potentially needing a future core here in a couple of seasons, I really feel like Gulyayev would be a player I'd be pretty happy with if the Jets got him at 19th overall. Let me know what you think of these prospects so far and where you're looking at. Who are you looking at for some of your top draft picks, and who are you hoping might fall to the Jets? Drop them in the comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. And just a little bit, I kind of want to talk about the Jets next season and some things that I'm kind of hoping for in terms of internal development, because I feel like the Jets really need to focus on that over the next few years. We've talked about the Jets not always having the best pipeline when it comes to a path towards the NHL, and this upcoming season, I think, might be a really important transition point for making that a reality, especially as the Jets might not be spending a lot on free agents. Before we dive into that, though, I did want to shout out our friends and partners at Athletic Greens. Our next partner has a product that I use literally every day. I started taking AG1 because I was looking for a boost to my immune system and something to get my daily routines going. If you're wondering what AG1 is, it's just one delicious scoop that helps you absorb 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens. It's a great option and alternative to cold brews. A lot of you know how expensive that stuff is, and AG1 costs less than $3 a day, which is a lot cheaper than most of those juice bars you're probably going to. And best of all, AG1 is very dietary friendly. They know that your lifestyle can be very choosy, and you have to be careful with stuff, and that's why it doesn't have any GMOs or weird additives and contains less than 1 gram of sugar. And best of all, it's keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, and gluten-free friendly, so no matter what dietary or lifestyle restriction you're following, AG1 wants to make sure that you're enjoying it to the fullest, right? And with over 7,000 5-star reviews and plenty of testimonials from pro athletes and trainers and fitness enthusiasts just like you, AG1 is the perfect way to jump in. So right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every single day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Hello, friends, and welcome back to these closing thoughts on tonight's episode of Locked On Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm just wrapping up really quickly with some final thoughts ahead of next season. I think for me, this coming year is not one that I'm abundantly eager for. I think I was more excited last season, or I guess this season technically, with the start of the Bones era and how things were looking, even if the improvements were sometimes a little slower than we'd like to be, or that we'd like to let on, right? But I think next season, one big thing that I want the Jets to focus on is establishing the pipeline to the NHL. I think for Winnipeg for the past couple of years, we really haven't seen a lot of young players or guys who realistically deserve NHL shots actually get a look with this team, which is kind of a shame because when you block off contract spots with guys who are capable NHLers and solid veteran free agent signings, you do kind of preclude yourself from finding out if any of the guys internally might actually offer you a little more. I'm not like the world's biggest Jansen Harkins fan, but I can tell you that offensively speaking, he could probably bring more than Saku Menelainen. Saku, of course, we know at 5v5 is kind of a buzzkill, amazing on the PK. Like the guy on the PK is like Wayne friggin' Gretzky. It's unbelievable. But when it comes to even strength play, Menelainen hasn't always been able to keep up. And that's where I feel like a Harkins or maybe a Christian Reichel would be able to do the same job. Now, I'm not saying that you necessarily want to deplete the Moose. Manitoba needs to be competitive as well, but I think having a pathway that gets guys to the league and helps the Jets develop players internally would do a lot to cutting down on those wage costs as well. Winnipeg has spent a lot of money on free agents, not necessarily like in terms of total cash, but just in like the number of contracts and stuff that they've been sending out. And it's not like, a league minimum here deal or there is the worst idea. Stenland, Gagne, all those guys, they were great value for the signings. It's just, I feel like in some areas, the Jets have also added players that they could actually do stuff internally with. And that extra little bit of cap space can be really important when it comes to not only developing players internally and helping to establish that pipeline, but also, saving some cash and opening yourself up for the trade deadline, right? You really want to have some space in contracts and cap space to bring in some extra salary if you're actually serious about competing. Not that the Jets will be next season, but it is something that I would like the team to focus on, and also just make that pipeline a lot clearer. I think players who get drafted and come to this team, there's a lot of frustration that there's not an easy pathway. Ville Heinola has expressed frustration over and over again, and I know people will say that he didn't really earn a spot, but he had a couple of games here this year that made him look like a really bona fide quality NHLer, especially over some of the existing defenders that we have now. And I feel like at the bare minimum, you could have at least used him in some interesting options on like the third pair, right? But it is what it is. It just feels like the Jets haven't really done the best job of managing the roster and actually leaving opportunity for young players to really get in. Sandberg is one of the few exceptions, and it actually took him forever to get in. So, yeah, not always the happiest outcomes there. But we'll see how it pans out and develops over the next few months. It'd be nice if this Jets team has some legitimate internal competition and they don't have to fight for spots against veterans who are just going to get the spots anyways. Let me know your thoughts on how the Jets are doing developmentally speaking. Do you think the team does well enough to create that pipeline, or do you think the Jets need to open up more spots? Give me your thoughts in the comments below or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, though, that is going to be all the time that we have. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day, every day. We will see you back here tomorrow, and as always, thanks for listening. Have a great night, and go Jets go.